Well, here's the final chapter, chapter 14 of the book of Zechariah. Some profound things we've learned through this whole chapter. All the chapters in the book of Zechariah have been amazing. If you haven't watched all those videos, go back and watch them as well. Some profound things we've learned through this amazing book that very few people really think about. I mean, when you think of books of the Old Testament, this is not one most people are going to think about. But man, is it profound what we've learned in here. So this one is about the second coming of Christ. So just like we've mentioned in the past, oftentimes when the doomsday prophecies are given, the last part of that prophecy is the reminder that there is redemption, there is hope. And Christ is that hope. We're going to see that today. So verse 1, behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. So the battle of Armageddon is what they're talking about here, and this is a part of the battle we haven't seen. Again, these are the snapshots. We haven't seen this snapshot in the earlier chapters in Zechariah. So as we see this, it's not going to go well. This battle eventually goes bad for Jerusalem. They're going to feel like they're going to lose and go bad, basically. Verse 3, then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations when he fought in the day of battle. So Christ is going to come, the Lord is going to come, and he's going to take care of this invading army. Verse 4, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south. So the Mount of Olives is going to split into two mountains, with a valley in the middle going east and west, basically. So when the people flee from Jerusalem, heading to the east, they're going to go, and what's probably going to happen is that people are going to be in disarray, big earthquake's going to happen, Mount of Olives is going to split, and they're going to go, that's the way out. We have an escape. And they're going to get out of town, basically. It's probably what it's going to be. Verse 5, and ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azal. Yea, ye shall flee like as ye fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. Now let's pause for a second here, okay? We're talking about the last days, Battle of Armageddon, things are happening here, but they just referenced an earthquake from the days of Uzziah. So this goes back into Old Testament times even further. This is an important one for us to understand. Now, this earthquake has been mentioned a couple of times in the past. It took some time historically to be able to actually figure this out with archaeological records and things what happened. So this, since it's brought up here, let's talk more about this earthquake. Get some information here, okay? This is very important for us to consider. So according to Dr. Joe Uziel and Ortal Chalaf, excavation directors on behalf of the Israel Antiquities Authority. These are the doctors, the professors of archaeology that are doing archaeological research for the nation of Israel, basically. They said here, when we excavated the structure and uncovered an 8th century BCE layer of destruction, we were very surprised, because we know that Jerusalem continued to exist in succession until the Babylonian destruction, which occurred about 200 years later. So as they're doing archaeological research, okay, they dig down to a period, remember, the layers of earth get younger and younger as they go up, so the deeper they dig, the farther in the past they go. They hit a layer where they're seeing signs of pottery, of tools, weapons, other things that would date to the 8th century BC. Okay, so this is getting into 700s BC time frame. And so they're saying here basically that they know Jerusalem made it until the Babylonian destruction of 587. So that's getting into 200 years later, so like 6th century BC. Okay, that's when Babylon, Jerusalem was first destroyed. They weren't destroyed during the Assyrian conquest. Jerusalem was saved. The northern kingdoms were destroyed, but Jerusalem has stayed. Nobody else, the Philistines, the Ammonites, everybody else has not been successful at destroying Jerusalem. So Babylon was the one, 587 BC. But they're seeing here basically when they dug below that destruction, they're seeing that there was another destruction in Jerusalem around the 8th century. And they're going, wait, but Jerusalem survived. Jerusalem made it. So what is this destruction? What's going on with this? So they said, we asked ourselves what could have caused that dramatic layer of destruction we uncovered. Examining the excavation findings, we tried to check if there is a reference to it in the biblical text. Interestingly, the earthquake that appears in the Bible in the books of Amos and Zechariah occurred at the time when the building we excavated in the city of David collapsed. The combination of the finds in the field together with the biblical description led us to the conclusion that the earthquake that struck the land of Israel during the reign of Uzziah, king of Judah, also hit the capital of the kingdom, Jerusalem. Now, according to the researchers, they said the earthquake that occurred in the middle of the 8th century BCE was probably one of the strongest and most damaging earthquakes in ancient times. And evidence of its occurrence has been discovered in the past in excavations conducted at a variety of sites throughout Israel, such as Hazor, Gezer, Tel Agol, and Tel Es Safi Gath. Now, the latest excavations we conducted in the city of David indicate that the earthquake probably hit Jerusalem as well. So they found this layer of destruction. They basically found buildings collapsed, but there wasn't like destruction, like battles. But a lot of people died. Buildings collapsed on top of other people. So they didn't find evidence of war, just evidence of a lot of destruction. And they realized that's an earthquake. Buildings falling over, toppling over on people, that's an earthquake. So a great earthquake happened, and now they have the archaeological evidence to prove it. What they believed was this earthquake was around an 8.2 in magnitude. That is a very big earthquake, because when you look at the magnitude scale of earthquakes does not run on a linear fashion, meaning you have a 1.0 earthquake, and then a 2.0 is double a 1.0, and a 3.0 follows that same pattern, so a 4.0 would be double a 2.0. It's not a line drawn between them, okay, a linear chart. It is an exponential chart. So you have to realize every time you go from a 1 to a 2, when you go up one more number on the scale of earthquakes, you go up a magnitude of like 10 times greater. It's huge. Like a magnitude 1 earthquake and a magnitude 2 earthquake, actually I think it's more of 100 times. If you go 1.1, it's 10 times. 1.2 is 10 times greater than 1.1. So when you go up, you get from a 1 to a 2 is 100 times greater. A 2 to a 3 is 100 times greater than a 2. So it's like 200 times greater than a 1. A 4 is 100 times greater than a 3. So it's like more than double a 2, basically. It's huge. This is an exponential growth factor. So an 8.2 earthquake is massive. Now we think about in our modern day, the equivalent we can think of is the earthquake off the coast of Japan that caused the tsunami. That was a 9 earthquake, but that happened a mile away from land, and it still shook violently the whole country of Japan, and then caused that huge tsunami that came in. Oh man, it was bad, and that was a ways away. So this earthquake was still close enough to Jerusalem to do some destruction to it as well. That's what they found. They believe it shook for 90 seconds, a minute and a half. So the size of the earthquake is one thing. That's like being hit, like a sonic boom hitting, but then shaking that violently for 90 seconds. Most earthquakes we feel today are like 30 seconds, 30, 45 second long earthquakes. 90 seconds will feel like forever, especially at an 8.2 magnitude. You have enough time to comprehend the earth is shaking and everything is falling apart. Oh my gosh, when is this going to end? And then it keeps shaking for longer. And then you go, is this not going to end? You had enough time to think through that thought a couple times in a minute and a half. So big earthquake that happened for a long period of time caused massive destruction, especially with stone-built buildings back then. So that's what they're talking about. So this is going to be a huge earthquake in Jerusalem that splits the Mount of Olives in the last days. Another really, really big earthquake. Now, verse 6, let's continue on now now that we understand that a little bit more. And it shall come to pass in that day that the light shall not be clear nor dark. So that could talk about the light, like the sun is going to be partially blocked. There's probably going to be a lot of dust in the sky from the shaking, a lot of smoke going up, things like that. Not totally dark, but not clear either. Verse 7, but it shall be one day which shall be known to the Lord, not day nor night. But it shall come to pass that at evening time it shall be light. So what does that mean? What's going on? So this is interesting because this is the same idea of in the Book of Mormon times, the sign of Christ, if you remember. Okay. When he was born, there was the sign in the Book of Mormon times that there would be a day and a night and a day as if there were no night. It won't get dark. So think of the idea if you go up above the Arctic Circle, the further north you go, you get to a point where the sun sets, kind of gets near the horizon and then turns and comes back up. It doesn't get dark all the way. So we could think of this in a similar way, okay, as this destruction happens. Now that doesn't necessarily mean maybe it means the earth is shifted and so the sun's position is different so it doesn't go down. This could mean more of the idea of as Christ comes, he becomes like a beacon of light to the people. There's a few ways that this could be taken. But verse 8, it shall be in that day that living waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the former sea, half of them toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter shall it be. So this is a perpetual river. It's not going away. It doesn't dry up in the dry season. It's perpetual, okay? So if you think about this, this is not so much talking about during that earthquake destruction. This is talking about when Christ comes, he is going to be the light. Now we've heard about this idea in other parts of the scriptures talking about this last days prophecy. I think Isaiah and Jeremiah had a little bit of this. Ezekiel, I believe, had a little bit of this too, that the city of Jerusalem will be so bright that the other armies, the other people are going to go, yeah, we're not going to go that way. They have like their own light source. They won't need the sun. It will be bright because of the light of God, the glory of God on the city. In fact, from a distance, for the people who aren't there, it's going to feel like there's this energy coming off of them, off of the city, this intensity of this energy, and they're not going to want to approach it because it will consume them, their physical bodies. They can't withstand that glory. So that's probably what this is really referring to here. Verse 9, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall there be one Lord, and his name one. So this is again, Christ comes, he's going to save the people from this army, and he will be the king of the world. Now you have to understand something here. There's an assumption that's made, okay? In order for Christ to be king of the world, other nations have to go away, basically. So we want to be careful about this, that these other nations are going to struggle with this, basically. They're not going to be around. So a lot of nations have to go away. Destruction of nations will happen before Christ comes so that he can take the world. He can't come down and take the world if the world is divided into nations because they don't want to follow him. So for them to follow him, they have to have a lot of nations go away, basically. So that's an important thing for us to think about. Now verse 10, all the land shall be turned as a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, and it shall be lifted up and inhabited in her place, from Benjamin's gate unto the place of the first gate, unto the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananeel unto the king's wine presses. Now, we don't know where a lot of these places are right now, basically, but the people of Zechariah's day would have known what these locations are, where they're at, what does that mean, basically. But it's pretty much just kind of talking about everything is going to be better, basically. Verse 11, and men shall dwell in it, and there shall be no more utter destruction, but Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. That's going to be a great place to live, to be there with God's protection. Verse 12, and this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet. Their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. Now, this is really interesting because this is beginning to talk about like what's going to happen to all those people who were fighting against Zion. So far in Zion, it's going to be peaceful and happy and a great place to be. Outside of Zion, though, there's a huge contrast. People will be their flesh will be consumed away. We could think of kind of the analogous idea of like a nuclear blast. Just tear your body apart, basically. It could be more the energy of the Lord's glory. You get too close, it just kind of dissolves your body because your mortal cells cannot survive the energy coming from the Lord. Kind of an idea, but there's more to learn about. So let's go to verse 13. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord shall be among them. And they shall lay hold every one on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor. So there's going to be a lot of fighting outside of Jerusalem. Verse 14, and Judah also shall fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the heathen round about shall be gathered together, gold, silver, apparel in great abundance. And so shall be the plague of the horse, of the mule, of the camel, of the ass, and of all the beasts that shall be in these tents as this plague. So that's this idea of the people who are fighting against Israel are going to be destroyed, basically. And then they're all going to be gone. That army will be destroyed, and so those who there's the stuff that they had is going to be left over, and then that'll be the people in Jerusalem will be like, oh, let's take all of this wealth they brought with them for this army, and then we'll gather it up and be able to use it for ourselves. Verse 16, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Now let's look at this verse here. This is really interesting. So there will be, it says here, it's talking about everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem. So this isn't talking so much about the Israelites. This is talking about everybody else, basically. They shall come up annually from year to year to worship the King and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So non-Israelite, non-church members still on earth during this time, they survived the battle and the plagues, basically. And they are now going, we want to go worship Christ, basically. It's interesting to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. No need for Passover. They have been saved, basically. The Feast of Atonement might not be needed since Christ is with them. The Feast of Tabernacles is honoring the Exodus, bringing people to the Promised Land, Zion with Christ. So that's the thing to think about. So this isn't Passover, which you're remembering and thinking about the atonement of Christ. The atonement has been done. The Christ is with them as their Lord and Savior and King. So they won't need that. But this is, Feast of Tabernacles is remembering them coming out of Egypt. Basically. So the idea of leaving the world, coming to Zion, kind of an idea. So it could be a change in what the Feast of Tabernacles does at that time is possible. Verse 17, and it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. So those who don't come, the weather is not going to be favorable for you, basically. A lot of droughts, famines, problems still. In Zion, where Christ will be great. Abundance, no problems. But the rest of the world's going to still be in a bad mess, basically. 18, and if the family of Egypt go not up, and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So, verse 19, in fact, this shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So it's going to be, if you're not keeping that Feast of Tabernacles, it's going to be a crazy time, basically. A lot of destruction, a lot of problems. Verse 20, in that day shall there be upon the bells of the horses holiness unto the Lord, and the pots in the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. So the Lord's house is temple. So this is a temple built at Jerusalem for God. And even they're so much into worshiping God that it's not going to say holiness unto the Lord on the temple only. It's going to say it on the bells that are on the horses. Basically, the bells will say holiness unto the Lord. Everything, down to the smallest detail, will be there for holiness to the Lord, basically, which is going to be a great thing. Verse 21, yea, every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts, and all they that sacrifice shall come and take of them, and seeth therein, and in that day there shall be no more the Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts. The Old Testament study manual had an interesting thought on this last verse here. They say, in beautiful imagery, Zechariah taught that in the millennium, peace and righteousness will prevail to a point where everything symbolized by such trifles as the trappings on horses and earthen jars shall be holy and pure, and where there shall be no more Canaanite, aka the wicked, in the house of the Lord of hosts. So the temple will be dedicated. Only worthy people will be going into the temple. Won't be messed with idols and other things like we've had in the past temples and challenges. But it'll be a great day. It will be a great day. Now, just like with a lot of the other books in the Old Testament, there's the contrast. Okay, that's what they've talked about here. In Zion, it's going to be great, but you have to keep the commandments and obey God to be in Zion. Outside of Zion, not going to be so great. So the only question still to be answered is, where are you going to be when this happens? Are you going to be the one that's keeping the commandments, that's worthy to go to the temple, or are you not going to be? So we'll see you in the next book. Thanks.